Thank you so much for coming. I'm Michelle. And whenever you're ready, you can just start.
Okay, thanks, Michelle. I will start sharing my screen. Are you actually able to enable for me to share?
Yes, I just did. Sorry.
No, you're fine. Sorry, one moment. It's saying I have like some preferences that I need to change for this real quick. Let me see if it, okay, there we go. Perfect. Okay, let me know if you can see my slides.
Yep, we can.
Okay, perfect. Okay, I'll go ahead and get started. So thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be talking to you all today, and I'm excited that you joined me. So my name is Megan Larison. I am a PharmD graduate from the University of Kentucky. I recently graduated in May of 2020. So now I am completing a 2-year postdoctoral pharmaceutical industry fellowship, specifically in oncology. So today I'm just wanting this to be very casual, laid back presentation about kind of my journey to pharmacy and getting a fellowship. And along the way, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask throughout the presentation. If you would prefer to type them in the chat, maybe Michelle, you can kind of monitor that. It's sometimes hard to see the chat when I'm presenting. So if there's any questions that come up, feel free to just ask them. I want it to be very informal and for you all to really benefit from this presentation more than anything. So we'll go ahead and get started. So first, I always have to start with a disclaimer, just more for confidentiality based on my company and fellowship. So the opinions expressed in this presentation and on the following slides are solely of those of myself and not of Rutgers University or Merck, my partner company. So they don't guarantee the accuracy or reliability of the information. So just a little disclaimer I always have to do for presentations. But we'll go ahead and kind of just jump into more why I decided to pursue pharmacy, and then to give you some other just thoughts to think about if you're considering pharmacy yourself. So I thought probably back in high school, I started thinking about what career path I really want to pursue, applying to college and what courses and what just area I want to go into. So I had always been good at math and science. And so I felt like that kind of aligned with going into healthcare, as well as an interest in just really how the human body works. And then when I heard of the pharmacist role, I felt like it sounded just really interesting, kind of putting both of those things together and learning how the drugs can work in someone's body and the effects, the positive effects and the negative effects that it can have on someone. So I really was interested in pharmacy for those reasons. And I didn't like the hands-on with patients. I am not good with blood and things like that. So I knew I couldn't do anything like more hands-on in like surgery or just seeing patients in that aspect. So I felt like pharmacy was a better fit for me. I am someone that will always wants to challenge myself and learn continuously. And pharmacy is an area that you will constantly be learning even on a daily basis in, because there's going to be new drugs coming out throughout your lifetime, and you're going to have to stay on top of all the new drugs that are coming out, how they work, what they're indicated for, and things like that. So if you really like to be challenged and learning continuously throughout your life, then pharmacy is a great area for that. So as I mentioned, you can have direct patient care as well as indirect patient care. So most of you are probably more familiar with the retail pharmacist. So they have more direct patient care where they can counsel patients face to face on medications they're picking up at the pharmacy or administering vaccines. In the hospital, pharmacists can have direct patient care, counseling on medications, rounding and seeing patients face to face and talking to them, doing medical reconciliations. Or in industry is more non-traditional, and that's where I'm in, is more indirect patient care. So I don't work with patients on a day-to-day basis. I really don't have much interaction with them at all, but the work I'm doing is impacting patients and their care and is honestly life-changing, especially in oncology. So it's very rewarding to me. Even though I don't get to see them face to face, I know I'm reaching a larger amount of patients this way. So in pharmacy, there is a very wide, there's a very wide variety of career opportunities. Most of you probably think of a retail pharmacist when you think of pharmacy. And unfortunately, a lot of people just think, oh, pharmacists, they count pills. Really, newsflash, we do a lot more than that. That's one thing that a lot of people think of, like, oh, they just count pills behind a counter. But I will say you learn a lot more in pharmacy school. So there are retail pharmacists, hospital pharmacists in industry, and even more other areas beside of that. So a lot of people are starting to question, well, is pharmacy getting oversaturated? I have a lot of people asking me that are interested in applying to pharmacy school and becoming a pharmacist. So yes and no. So there are a lot of pharmacy schools popping up, but that doesn't mean that the quality of pharmacists they're pumping out are as strong. Some of the pharmacy schools may not be accredited, so that's something else you have to take into consideration, making sure you're really looking into a quality pharmacy school. And then with the opportunity for a wide career opportunities, I think that really helps it not be as saturated. So in retail, yes, maybe that's a little bit more saturated because it's a direct path. It's the easiest way to become a pharmacist. So right after pharmacy school, if you go straight into retail, that's usually the easiest way. You don't require any postdoctoral training afterwards. So that area may be getting a little bit more saturated, but I think if you're interested in specializing outside of that and are willing to do a little bit more training after pharmacy school, then I don't think that area is saturated at all. And honestly, people are always going to be sick, unfortunately, and they're going to need medication, so they're going to need a pharmacist. So I wouldn't let that discourage you if you are thinking, is pharmacy getting too saturated? I still think there is many opportunities. Some other skill sets that if you're kind of reflecting on pharmacy, would it be a good fit for me? If you are someone that's very innovative and detail oriented, I think those are two skills that pretty much most pharmacists have. So you have to be very detail oriented in the work that you're doing when you are checking prescriptions and making sure, is this the right drug? Is this the right strength? Really paying attention to those close details that make a difference for patients. Even on my side in industry, which I'll talk to a little bit later about more specifically what I do, but I'm like when I'm reviewing medical materials, I have to review them very closely for details about clinical studies and making sure the science and data are very specific and kind of align with the clinical trials. And then being innovative, I think that's another thing that people don't necessarily always think about, but pharmacy is going to be constantly changing whether you're working directly with patients or not. So you really have to stay on the top of everything, your knowledge and just the way you provide care to patients and coming up with new innovative ideas on how patients to get their medications or in the drug development process. So I think that's really important as well. And this kind of goes along with the career opportunity, so the mobility, stability, and flexibility of the pharmacist role. So let's say you graduate pharmacy school and you go into retail and you are there for a few years, but maybe it becomes like very stressful or overwhelming or even boring to you. that's not the end of your career. You can easily switch to another area of pharmacy. So it's nice that even though what you go into right after pharmacy school doesn't mean that's what you're going to be in for life. It's very easy to move around, even from hospital to industry. I think the clinical knowledge and experience that you have from working in a hospital is very valuable in the industry setting as well. I have a preceptor that worked at a hospital for, I think, over 18 years and then came to industry the last few years. So it's definitely easy to kind of move around and be flexible with your career. And then lastly, I'll touch on, it is a very highly respected and trusted professionals as a pharmacist. So you're the most accessible doctor or healthcare professional that patients can reach. So if a patient has a question about their medication that they're on, if they're having some side effects, they can easily call their Walgreens pharmacist or even go into the pharmacy and see them face to face. Whereas if you need to see your doctor, you're going to have to make an appointment and go in and pay a copay. Even not just patients recognizing they trust their pharmacist, but even other medical professionals. So in the hospital, when pharmacists are rounding with physicians, they're always looking to the pharmacist for just the safety of the medications. Are they dosing this correctly for a patient? They really rely on the pharmacist to catch any medication errors, to help them know what medications are best for the patient. So overall, among the patients and the physicians, pharmacists are really respected. So any questions so far? If not, I'll keep going along, but I wanted to at least give you the opportunity to ask. Okay, well, I will go into some career opportunities in pharmacy. I had kind of touched on these earlier. So hospital is one area. So in hospital, you can do staffing. So this would be more just kind of your medication verification, any medications that come to the pharmacy in the hospital. You're checking those, making sure they're dosed right for the patient, making sure they're for the right indication. There's also more specialized like clinical pharmacists. So these can be specialized in certain areas like oncology or cardiovascular, and they would be on a medical team and they would round with a whole healthcare team. So like doctors and nurses and physical therapists, you would go around and see patients and you would really be a part of the team and able to make recommendations for the patients and making sure that they're not missing any medications that they need, any discrepancies with their home medications. Sorry. Then there's the retail setting that most people are familiar with. So they're verifying the prescriptions, they're making sure there's no drug interactions with their other medications that they may be on. They're counseling the patients face-to-face for any new medications. In some states, they're able to administer vaccines. So that's some main roles that pharmacists do in retail. And then industry, that is my niche and where I'm very passionate about. So that's more indirect patient care, obviously, and it's working through the kind of drug development process, the behind the scenes stuff. So it's checking the drugs for efficacy, safety, it's going through the marketing and promoting them, educating the doctors on them, and taking all of that stuff and putting back into the company and looking for where is there a need in patients. Is there not a cure for this disease, or how can we improve a drug? So that's going back into the company and doing more research to bring better drugs to patients. Next, in ambulatory care. So this is another clinical area for pharmacists. It is kind of like an outpatient clinic setting. So it's very specialized as well. If patients are on warfarin or have diabetes, these are medications that they're on that they need to be getting checked often. So for example, if a patient's on warfarin, they have to get their INR checked every so often. So a pharmacist can work in this setting, and a patient will come in, they can test their INR, and then the pharmacist themselves can recommend a dose adjustment based on their readings. And the same thing for like diabetes and testing their glucose as well. So that's another like clinical setting, but not where you have to work in a hospital if you don't like hospitals as much and want to be in more like an outpatient clinical setting. Next, another area in pharmacy is veterinarian pharmacy. So you would probably be working more with like equine animals, so like horses, some smaller animals as well. But I think it's very important for pharmacists in veterinarian pharmacy to be dosing medication for like larger animals when it is like weight-based, and there's a lot more to take into consideration. So if you're interested in animals and being like really close to their care and helping them, I think that's a great area in pharmacy as well. And then managed care, this works more on like the insurance and payer side. So it's helping patients get the most out of their healthcare. And if they're on a medication that is a lot more expensive and they might not be able to afford it, or if they've been paying for a more expensive medication, you really can help manage their care by finding alternatives that are cheaper but still just as effective, and just helping them to get the most out of their healthcare benefits. So now we'll move on to applying to pharmacy school. So if you're in undergrad and starting to think about pharmacy school, or even just considering it and wondering what do I need to do now, or how can I get there? So these are just some key points that I think are really important and that really helped me to get into pharmacy school looking back on. So I would say one of the most important things is to acquire leadership experience, and just acquiring any type of organization involvement I think is really important. So yes, grades are important, but honestly, if you're looking at someone that has a 4.0 and then someone that has like a 3.5 or 3.7, and the person with a 4.0 may not have any other experiences, no work experience, no organization or leadership involvement, whereas someone with maybe a little bit lower grades but still they're very smart, they have all these other experiences, I think that person would be way more qualified in their future career. Because yes, it is great to make good grades and it shows you have discipline and dedication to studying, but what else can you apply to your actual career? Whereas if you have these experiences where you've had conflicts with people, I mean, that's a huge thing, is learning how to work with others and working through conflicts and communicating with others and leading other people and having work experience and responsibilities. I think that really can help you grow and diversify yourself to really stand out in any type of application process. At all. So I highly recommend you just get involved. And I know it's nerve-wracking at first. I remember my first like leadership position in organization. It is a lot, but it definitely pays off in the long run. So if you're interested in that, just join an organization and be in it a while and learn if you really like it, and then apply for leadership positions. And next is if you are looking at pharmacy schools to apply to, most of them do have pre-pharmacy clubs, and I would recommend joining those because they provide you with all the information for their application process. Because every pharmacy school has a little bit different application process, different requirements, and so it's really important that you know what's required when you're applying, knowing all the deadlines. So those pre-pharmacy clubs are really great. They even will have I think other pharmacy speakers come in, and so you can hear other pharmacists talk, you know what's really required, whether it's like an essay that you have to write ahead of time, if it's the PCAT, which I know that's changing. So that's the standardized test to get into pharmacy school. But now I know a lot of pharmacy schools are kind of doing away with that. I had to take it, unfortunately. It was really bad. Don't recommend it if you don't have to take it. But that's something you have to consider. So if you do have to take it, it is pretty expensive, and you're going to have to pay for like the prep course books and the time that you're going to have to study for it, and then paying for the exam. But not all schools are doing that. So you don't want to go out of your way and study for this exam if the school's not requiring it. So definitely, if you are interested in applying, like look into those pre-pharmacy clubs. And then gaining pharmacy experience, I think this is very valuable, because if you're thinking about pharmacy but you've never really been exposed to a pharmacist or working in a pharmacy, you don't want to dedicate 4 years of your life to studying and tuition if you realize then later you don't really like it or it's not the right fit for you. So I worked in a retail pharmacy for 6 years. So I started in undergrad as a pharmacy tech. And then once I started pharmacy school, I became an intern. So even though I'm not in retail today, it did show me what I liked about pharmacy and what I didn't like. So I did get bored kind of with the same day-to-day repetitive task that you may have in retail pharmacy. Some people like having the same schedules over and over, and I think that's completely fine. But that's what makes us like we all have different interests, and I like a very like stimulating, different environment every single day. So I knew that wasn't the best fit, but I still loved learning about the medications in a retail pharmacy. I loved interacting with people, talking with people, communicating with them, talking about the science behind the drugs. That was very interesting to me. So I think once you have those experiences, then you can like step back and think like, oh, where do I fit best like within pharmacy as a career? And then the shadowing opportunities. I know with COVID, it's making it very difficult, but I think like this presentation today is a great opportunity. So definitely take advantage of these just to be able to get FaceTime with people, even outside of pharmacy. I know they have a lot of other healthcare professionals that speak at these meetings, but just gaining any insight to what you could potentially do in your future, I think is so beneficial. And then next, starting to build a strong CV or resume. So CVs are usually what you would use for, I think, like getting into pharmacy school and then post pharmacy school and like careers. I know resumes are probably more for like high school and stuff. So start building your resume. It's never too, or CV, sorry, too soon to start. One tip of advice that I've been given and I've started doing is write down the things that you are doing throughout like undergrad. So if you get involved in an organization and you lead an event or you work on a project in like a group or something like very important, write these things down, because if you wait till you go to apply for pharmacy school, it's going to be really hard to remember everything you did like over the past 3 or 4 years. So I've started doing that in my fellowship. So I use OneNote, and if I have a presentation that I give or a project I work on, I'll just like list it in OneNote. And then when I have time later on to start working on my CV, I'll go back and be able to look at all of those things I've done, because it is really hard to think back on stuff. So give yourself credit for the things that you do and write them down so you don't forget. And then lastly, it's also never too soon to start preparing for interviews. Unfortunately, you will probably have many interviews throughout your entire life and your career. So I think practice makes perfect with interviews, and most pharmacy schools do require some sort of like interview process. I know it's probably very different right now with everything being virtual, but still you'll have a virtual interview. For when I applied to pharmacy school, they were like multiple mini interviews. So it was more like a scenario or question. And it not even all of them were pharmacy related or healthcare related. They just wanted to see like your communication skills, your thought process, and like how you answered something more than the answer you were providing yourself. So one thing I will mention with interviewing is using the STAR method. If you can learn this early, even better. So STAR stands for situation, task, action, and result. If you touch on each of those in answering any interview question, it'll be like perfect. So I highly recommend using that for all future interviews. So now I'll move on to kind of the postgraduate training options. So as mentioned earlier, if you want to go straight into a pharmacist role after graduating, you can do that in retail and then some like pharmacy staffing positions. So that is one path. But if you want to become more specialized in other areas of pharmacy, there are postgraduate training options. So these are paid, so you can start making money. They are not as like full salary of a pharmacist, but it's not like you're just working for free like you do in pharmacy school or your last year of rotation. So A residency, so this usually is 1 or 2 years. You would apply your first year, and that would be very general residency. So it would be all areas in advanced hospital, and you can rotate through to kind of see if you want to specialize somewhere. So then your second year of residency, you would apply somewhere else that you would specialize, and that could be in a specific area like emergency medicine, critical care, oncology, things like that. Then fellowship, that is the pharmaceutical industry side. So that is what I'm completing right now. They're 1 and 2 years long, and I'll speak more on that on the next few slides. And then managed care residency. So that's another way to get into managed care and be more specialized in that area. So those can be like the other residencies, only 1 or 2 years. So the rest of the presentation, I will be talking about fellowship since that's my area and expertise, whereas residency, I don't know as much about. I do know some. So if you do have questions about that, I can try to answer them as well. So completing a pharmaceutical industry fellowship. So like I had mentioned, it is 1 or 2 years of postgraduate training. It's more based on kind of like your preference. They're already set up either in a 1 or 2 year, which is nice. Whereas residency, if you do 2 years, you have to apply for the first year and then apply for the second year. Whereas a fellowship like mine is 2 years, but I only had to apply once, and it's just like connected. So you don't have to apply twice. There are pros and cons to doing 1 and 2 years. So 1 year, obviously, you get done quicker and you can start making more money faster. But really, I feel like a year flies by so quick with learning, and you only get to be a fellow once. And really, being a fellow, you get to meet so many people, and that's your like kind of your free card to get exposure to whatever you want. Like it is your job, but if you want to see some area outside of what your fellowship is, you're allowed to take on a project and work with other people. Everyone is rooting for you. They want you to succeed. So you really get priority of your training during that. So they are completed at a partner pharmaceutical company. So as mentioned, I'm at Merck. And then they're academic affiliated or standalone. So some pharmaceutical companies will have their own fellowship program. So you can apply directly through them. Whereas my fellowship is through Rutgers University out of New Jersey. And I really am a little partial to it, but I will say I think there's a lot of benefits to having an academic affiliated fellowship. So there's I think like over 20 partner companies within Rutgers. So you have such a large network of pharmacists as soon as you start your fellowship. And really, networking in industry is so important. And just getting to meet other people, I think, is really exciting, and hearing about what they do and at their company. And there's a lot of other great opportunities when doing an academic affiliated fellowship besides just the networking. So research is really important to Rutgers. So we have the opportunity to work on like research posters or manuscripts, and they provide us like all of the guidance through this. You even can get pharmacy students to kind of help you do the research throughout your fellowship. So you can partner up and do a poster, and you have other opportunities to do like outreach visits to go and talk to students at pharmacy school. So I was able to go back to the University of Kentucky and speak with them just about my fellowship and all the great opportunities that I've had through it. And they have such a long-standing history of graduates from the program. So really, when they do see that if you're applying for jobs in the future, they could have gone through the program as well. And I think that really helps you stand out from just like the prestigious name of the program, and knowing if there was someone else that graduated from the program, they would probably be more apt to pick you for a job versus someone else that maybe wasn't associated with like an academic fellowship. And then most fellowships do have a therapeutic area of interest. So I'm in oncology, and that's some thing I'm really passionate about. And when I applied to fellowships, I really only applied to oncology positions. So in like residencies, you may be more general and interacting with a lot of other therapeutic areas where in a fellowship you are very like specialized, and people will say maybe like, oh, you don't feel like you're using as much of your clinical skills or your clinical knowledge that you learned in pharmacy school. And yeah, I will be honest, I don't remember a lot about antibiotics and the stuff that I don't use on a daily basis, but my knowledge in oncology has grown exponentially. And like even my friends that are doing residencies, they come across something in oncology, like they're contacting me to ask me for that because really the learning in that area is just like exponential, and you're staying on like the front of new drugs that are being developed for oncology. So finding an area that you're really interested in, I mean, that could be like diabetes, cardiovascular, rare diseases, really any company that has a specific drug that they work on, whatever that drug supports, then that would be like the therapeutic area. So next, I'll kind of break down the functional areas in the pharmaceutical industry. Most people think of like pharmaceutical industry and they're like, oh, so you work in like clinical trials or like drug development and research. And that is a big part of it, but there's a lot of other parts in industry as well. So these are kind of the main functional areas, and I'll kind of touch on each of them. I'm not an expert in all of them because I'm in medical affairs, and that's my area that I know a lot about. But I work closely with people in most of these other departments as well. So, regulatory affairs, they're working more closely with the FDA and making sure that the drugs that are being developed or that are in market are abiding by the FDA. Any marketing materials, they have to go through regulatory, and making sure everything that you're promoting for a drug or anything you're developing with a drug abides with the FDA. So if you're like a rule follower and really like regulatory stuff, that would be a great area for you. Marketing. So people think of like, oh, maybe marketing as like business or commercial, which it is, but you also still apply a lot of your medical knowledge in this area. So you're knowing how to market stuff to healthcare professionals, to doctors. So you may be creating promotional materials, creating the emails that you send out to doctors, maybe creating things that patients would see as well. So you really have to know that target audience. So using your medical background there would come into play in marketing. It's also a great area if you are someone that is very creative and has like a creative side. If you like a really fast-paced environment, marketing is definitely a great place for you. You get to be really creative with designing different materials. And then drug safety is another functional area. So this is like following the drug even after post-marketing and seeing all the adverse events that maybe are reported for a drug, and then taking this back into the company and like analyzing them and doing maybe further studies on a drug that maybe is already approved, and seeing continuing to monitor the safety of a drug over time. Medical affairs is another area. So this is where I work, and it really is kind of the center, I think, of a pharmaceutical company because they really interact with most of the other areas. So they work closely with regulatory, making sure that the insights that people in medical affairs are looking at or reviewing are aligning with regulatory. So in medical, there's medical information. So you can answer medical information requests from doctors. There's medical science liaisons. So they're out in the field, out in the field means it's not in the office. So they're usually traveling. So if you really like to travel, that's a great job as well. You're going and meeting with doctors to kind of establish a relationship to build clinical trials. So when you're at a pharmaceutical company and you are doing clinical trials on your drug, you want them to be used in practice and have like top leading doctors. So like oncologists, for example, you would want oncologists to partner with you to do a clinical trial. So they really help establish those relationships for them to set up clinical trials for their patients. And there's a lot of other areas within medical affairs, but I'll speak to what I do on the next slide as well. And then clinical development. So this is more the clinical trials. So if you are really interested in clinical trials, such as even developing and designing clinical trials, so if you're very like analytical and data driven, I think that's a great area for you as well. So you're kind of can even oversee clinical trials, you're getting the clinical trials approved, you're designing them, your patient population, your outcomes, your endpoints, all of that stuff. So it's definitely very detailed as well. And then health economics and outcomes research. That's looking at the data even further of patients' efficacy and safety, and then bringing that back into the company. So next, I will touch on some things to think about when you are choosing a functional area to pursue in the pharmaceutical industry. And I will say, so when you pick up a functional area within a company for a fellowship, usually when you're starting out, it's like good to really know what you want to do, but that doesn't mean you're going to always be in that functional area. People do switch around, like once they are more established within a company, they kind of realize like, I like this, but I wouldn't mind trying another area. So this is another where that pharmacy can be very flexible and mobile throughout your career. But first, I'll start by learning more about each functional area. So just the stuff that I had mentioned on the previous slide is very vague and like general of each area, just to give you a little overview, but do more research on what the day-to-day type of activities and what your main role is in each of those areas to see if you feel like it fits your interest and your skill set. Next, I think it's really important to start building your network early. So even pharmacy in general is a small world, and you meet a lot of other pharmacists, and I'm sure it's like that for any other healthcare niches. So start building your network. If you don't have a LinkedIn yet, create one and start connecting with people that have jobs that you're interested in. So when you make your LinkedIn, make it look professional and appealing, like having a professional photo of you. I mean, it doesn't have to be like professionally taken, but that's like a nice photo, and that you have a bio stating that you're interested in pursuing this career path. You can add your school on there, your accomplishments, any awards and stuff that you've received, because that makes your profile a lot more appealing to connect with. So if you're reaching out to someone and they see this, then they're probably a lot more apt to connect with you. And I always do recommend adding like a little message when you do connect with someone, kind of stating like that you're interested in learning more about their career and connecting with them. I think that always helps, because sometimes I'll get connections from people on LinkedIn and I have no idea who they are, and I'm like, I don't know if I really want to connect with you. Like, I want to build a relationship, and I think that's the important part of networking, is knowing how to build those relationships, and that will ultimately help each other throughout your career. And next, considering your personality, skills, and kind of your preferences. So a lot of this goes into thinking of the functional area, even the career path in pharmacy in general. So I feel like I really like connecting and building relationships with people, and I like talking about the science, and I feel like I have strong communication skills, time management skills. So I felt like medical affairs was really a great fit for me. Work-life balance is also something that's really important to me as well. And I feel like in industry, they highly value the work-life balance. You get all the holidays off, you never work weekends, where as retail and other areas in pharmacy, you most likely will be having to work weekends. You may be working late evenings, early mornings. So that's another thing, is when you're thinking about preferences and kind of your future, something else to take into consideration. And then I think it's always good, if you can, to gain experience in one or more functional area. So getting an internship or rotation at a pharmaceutical industry, because I will say it is kind of harder you can't really shadow at a pharmaceutical company, whereas you can go shadow a pharmacist in a hospital, just more for confidentiality reasons and stuff. And right now we're virtual and working from home, so that makes it even harder. But if you are able to apply to an internship or a rotation during pharmacy school, that will really give you firsthand experience. You'll get to take on projects and meet with people. So that will really also help you with choosing what functional area you may be interested in. So now I'll touch on more of what I do in my role as an Oncology Global Medical Affairs Fellow. So, like I mentioned, pharmacy and industry is definitely a very stimulating environment. You don't really do the same thing every day, and that's what I love about it. Every day is different. You don't really get bored with doing a lot of stuff like over and over. So, it's hard to say what my day to day really looks like, but I'll break it down for you more by like the week because I do have similar meetings that occur on a weekly basis. So I'd say usually Mondays and Fridays are more of kind of like Mondays, like preparing for the week and for the meetings and working on projects, answering emails. So you get a lot of emails. So just managing your email inbox and working on projects and preparing for your meetings throughout the week. And then Tuesdays and Thursdays, I would say, are very meeting heavy. So I'm usually in meeting, like probably have 3 to 4 meetings on those days that last definitely longer than an hour. And those are where we are reviewing the promotional material. We may be talking about congresses and planning for upcoming conferences and just whatever's going on in the medical world at that time. And then Wednesdays are kind of a little mix. We may have some meetings, and then I have the other half of the day to work on my projects. And then Fridays are usually a little bit slower. They discourage you to have meetings in the afternoon, which I really appreciate. So it's another day to kind of wrap up everything from the week, finish up any projects, start on projects for the following week. So they're usually a little bit more relaxed, which is nice. And we do disease state presentations. So we'll talk about an oncology topic with me and my other co-fellows on Friday. So that's something fun we can do to really expand like our knowledge in other areas in oncology. Now, I will touch on kind of my role in global medical affairs. So, during the first year of my fellowship, I'm in medical information only. So, I'm working on medical review of promotional materials. So, this is think of promotional materials as it could be a commercial on TV, it could be an ad that you maybe see on Facebook for a certain medication, it could be an email that goes to a doctor, anything like that. So all of those materials have to be reviewed for medical accuracy. A commercial can't just be made from like marketing and be put on TV without being reviewed for medical accuracy. So this is making sure that all the claims they're stating align to the scientific data that backs it up. You can get in a lot of legal trouble from the FDA if you're stating or over-promising something about your drug that really isn't backed up by science. So medical review is definitely something that's very detail-oriented and tedious work because you have to know the clinical trials basically inside and out. And so you're reviewing these materials and then you will go to a larger meeting like the meetings I had mentioned earlier. And you're in these meetings kind of working cross-functionally with people that are in regulatory and the people that are creating these materials in marketing. So everyone at these meetings kind of has a different role, whereas I'm reviewing the medical accuracy, the people in marketing are using the more creative side, what's going to appeal to the audience that is going to see this, and then regulatory is making sure that everything that is being promoted is not going against the FDA. Next, the other part of my role as a fellow in medical information is responding to medical information requests. So these are questions that we receive potentially from doctors or sales reps. So say a doctor is using our drug and they want to know something else about it, like how to dose modify it, or they want to see more data on using it in a certain population. So if a patient has like MS or something, is there data on how this drug works in someone with a pre-existing condition? So we're able to provide them that information to make the informed medical decision for their patients. So this area I find really fun too, because it's kind of like problem solving. So a doctor will come to you, and these most of the time come through like email, but you can even get them on the phone, and they'll ask you a question. You kind of have to find the data to support and answer the questions. And the sales reps, that can be if they're meeting with a doctor and they have like an off-label question or something that the sales rep isn't trained or allowed to answer, then they would send their question to us and we could answer it. And then the last part I will mention a little bit as well is the professional development days. So this is through Rutgers University, and I think this is another perk of being in a fellowship that is academic affiliated. So you have professional development days once a month. And these right now are virtual, unfortunately, but it's where all the fellows come together and they have guest speakers that come in and talk about various topics to really help you develop professionally. So this last one was talking on health literacy, which I think is something really important as well in pharmacy and just healthcare in general. They have guest speakers come in and talk about leadership and developing good leadership skills, really just anything that is going to help you become more well-rounded as a professional when you are applying for jobs. So I think those are really great opportunity with the fellowship as well. So now I want to leave like the last few minutes for any questions. I'd be happy to answer. No questions? Well, if you do think of any questions, I wanted to provide you my information, ways to connect with me. So feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn or Instagram, and you can send me a message on either of those platforms if you think of any questions about pharmacy or just in general or specific to my job or role, and I would be happy to answer them and connect with you. Michelle, is there anything else that you had? Well, thank you all so much for joining me. I was saying, is there anything else that you had?
That's about it. I wanted to ask if I'm not sure, I just like came halfway, but like what was your decision process in like becoming a pharmacist instead of like a physician or a PA?
Yeah, that's a great question. I kind of touched on it earlier, but the big thing for me was I was interested in healthcare, and I liked learning about drugs and kind of how they worked in the body, but I knew for me, I didn't want to be hands-on. Like I don't do well with blood. Even in pharmacy school, I had rotations that I was able to shadow surgeries and I like passed out during one. I was so embarrassed. But I knew for me, like I couldn't handle that hands-on stuff, but I still liked learning about the human body and especially how medications and drugs work. So that was kind of one thing that helped me decide which route in healthcare I wanted to go.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. If there are any other questions, I'd be happy to answer.
I just had a quick question. I know in pharmacy school you probably have to study a whole bunch, and I was just wondering, um, what are some study methods that you've used in the past that are very effective?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for me, definitely starting early, especially in pharmacy school, because you're going to have classes Monday through Friday and sometimes even all day. And for us in pharmacy school, we would have block exams. So we would have exams once a month on the weekend. So that would be like 4 or 5 exams all Friday through like Monday. So it is a lot to stay on top of. So I would recommend like starting early and after classes. So reviewing your notes even after class that day. It is a lot of sacrifice studying, but it does pay off. Rewriting your notes, rewatching lectures, anything like that really helped me. And we would have in-class quizzes, so it really does help you stay accountable to reviewing your notes and things like that. But just creating a schedule and saying like, I'm going to review my notes for an hour tonight before I go to bed, even if it's just laying in bed and reading them, but just starting earlier because really in pharmacy school, you can't cram and you're not supposed to because when you cram stuff, you just forget it after. And really that everything you learn in pharmacy school, you have to know like long term. So just starting early and really learning the material, I think is important.
And I had one more question. What are some of the biggest challenges you overcame in your like journey to become a pharmacist?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think that's really important because a lot of people look at failures as negative things, but really, I think how you react to them is important and just learning how to overcome them. Really, you learn more from your failures than your successes. So, one for me was really gaining the industry experience. So, going to the University of Kentucky, they are a very clinically focused school and they really support students going the residency route, but for industry, there was no support system or really exposure to gain experience in industry. So I really had to try hard to get that experience myself. So I would say first I had applied to internships maybe during my second summer of pharmacy school, and I got some interviews and I interviewed, but I didn't get the internship ultimately. So, yes, that's definitely discouraging not getting the internship, but it didn't discourage me from my ultimate goal. So, when it came to applying to rotations for your 4th year in pharmacy school, I applied to as many industry ones as I could. And the number one rotation that I really wanted and kind of had planned my whole industry experience and career around, I didn't get accepted for it either. And that was like really upsetting. But then I ended up getting accepted for one that ended up being like 100 times better, which is like bad to say, but everything happens for a reason. And like the rotation that I did get accepted for, I was able to do so much more from that. I was able to start like a new legacy for the students at UK. I built an affiliation agreement so other students can apply there. That's what gave me exposure to the Rutgers program. Like I moved to New Jersey for 6 weeks and it really taught me a lot of things. And I got a lot more connections from a larger program that way. So even if you do fail at one thing or get told no for something or don't get accepted, like don't give up on your end goal. Just think of other plans, try other things. It definitely pays off and don't give up. Like the hard work is definitely worth it. I do see a few questions in the chat now. Sorry, it's hard to see them whenever I'm in presentation mode, but I did see there was one. So when did you decide you wanted to specialize in oncology? So to be completely transparent, when I had oncology in pharmacy school, I was very intimidated. It is a very complex therapeutic area and very challenging. I did not like it at all during pharmacy school. I think we would have like these soap note exams where it would be over a certain type of cancer and we would have to work the patient up and know like how to treat them. And I remember there was like one I like left crying because I was like, I don't know what to do. Like, I'm pretty sure I failed that. So upset. Like, it was very hard. Well, then I had my industry rotation. So I was so excited to just be there because the industry experience was what I wanted. Well, that rotation was in oncology. So I was like, I don't care. I just want the industry experience. I'll learn the stuff I need to know for the oncology. So once I was there, yes, it was challenging, but I actually had some patient interactions, and it was a patient that had head and neck cancer. And she looked at me and said, we really need people like you that are young and bringing cures to our cancer and giving us like life changing drugs. So that was really impactful to me, and knowing that like I could make a difference. So after hearing that and like talking to patients face to face, knowing that I can really make a difference to extend their lives or extend their quality of life as well, that was what really kind of sparked my interest in oncology. As well as oncology, unfortunately, there's not a cure for cancer yet. So it's some area that they're doing like so much research in. So it is like very fast paced. There's a lot going on, but it's really exciting because potentially one day I could be working on a drug that maybe does cure cancer. Okay, and then there's a few other questions. What are some challenges that you faced when working in a medical field, and how did they build you as a person? So that's a great question. So I'd say challenges is definitely on your rotations during your fourth year. You don't know everything and they don't expect you to know everything, but it is intimidating because you go into these rotations, you're kind of thrown in with the healthcare team, you're rounding, they're asking you questions on how to dose drugs, what drug would you recommend? And it is definitely very intimidating, but I think through preparing, so on the rotations when you know you're going to be in a specific therapeutic area, doing your research, looking at your notes at night before, and preparing for the types of patients and medical conditions that you may be seeing on rotation, so you come prepared with the drug information to provide them. And if you don't know it, I think it's okay. Just tell them, I need to look this up and I'll get back to you, because as a pharmacist, you're not supposed to memorize every drug and every side effect. It's more knowing how they work, and then knowing how to research them and find the accurate medical information to provide to patients and doctors. And then just how they built me as a person. I think just being able to handle challenging and tough situations. So if I am in a situation where I don't feel like I know something, or I have to look up something really quick, being able to adapt to that and knowing what resources to use and knowing how to prepare kind of ahead of time. I think there is one other question. So what is something not many people know about pharmacy, and what is some advice you can give to those who want to pursue in a medical field? So for pharmacy in general, that people might not know is really the different areas in the career opportunities that I had mentioned earlier. So I think that's something big that people don't know about, all the opportunities and really how you can move around so much, and how you are so valued with your PharmD. Honestly, if you can make it through pharmacy school and survive, you can really do anything. Like after the studying and the degree that you earn, people value that, and really you can pick up anything so quickly, especially in industry. They know that you can learn something quickly. So no matter what field or area that you go into, it's just your training provides you the skills to do the job. And then what advice to give to someone that wants to pursue in the medical field? I think really just reflecting on yourself and what is your passion and doing it for your passion. Making sure this is a big decision, especially if you're going to go through school and paying for tuition is really expensive, but doing it for like the right reasons and finding out what you're passionate about, and because it's a lot of time and a lot of money to dedicate to if you don't think you're going to enjoy it after. I think your career, not job per se, like a career should be something that you enjoy every day. I mean, there are going to be hard days and there will be days that you don't like, but ultimately you want to wake up excited to be doing that in the morning. So if your passion is helping a certain demographics of people with certain medical conditions, if you really like working with the elderly or if you like working with children, just really figuring out what you like and what drives you. I think that's going to make the studying and getting through all the hard stuff so much easier if you know what you are passionate about and really like. So like kind of setting that goal and figuring out what you want to do. And then there are things in classes and rotations I hated, like did not like, but I knew I had to do them to get to where I wanted to be. So just staying on to what your passion and what really drives you. Any last questions? If you think of any, feel free to reach out to me. Thank you all so much for having me again, and thank you all for being here.
Thank you so much for coming. I really loved your presentation too. So thank you again.
Yeah, thanks, Abigail.
Thank you. Thank you.